Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Real Steel Evolution. What is so interesting about that knife? It literally just looks like another titanium frame lock. It is a titanium frame lock, but the frame lock itself is actually disengaged via the button on the show side scale. Furthermore, you can actually lock the frame lock out so that you cannot disengage the frame lock at all while you're using it, which is pretty cool. Not that I think generally frame locks have an issue during use because you're squeezing on it anyway, but we don't normally see that. That's a mechanism we don't normally see. I am going to return to that and talk some more about that. I think that's really cool. It also runs on phosphor bronze, which if you are familiar with, pocket knives and bearing systems and just internal pivot systems in general, you'll know that phosphor bronze does a great job of keeping debris out of the pivot. Now, normally I don't find myself in a situation where debris in the pivot slows me down too much, but for those of us who work in the dirtiest, dustiest environments, that can actually be a giant benefit. The way that they executed this is really great, and I want to talk about it today. Thanks so much to Real Steel Knives for supplying this knife for review. You can find this knife down in the description. I'll link it so that you guys can check it out if you want. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's get some quick specs and things real quick. Just realizing my scale is sitting on top there. That's not a convenient place for it. There we go. We have an overall measurement. This is not what I'd call a small knife. Overall length of actually over 8.5 inches. Blade length is coming in at 3.75. Cutting edge, thanks to a huge forward choil, is actually just a bit over 3. It's maybe 3 1/8, something like that. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others up against the AD10. You can see here, it's about the same overall length, just not quite as robust. Up against the AD 20.5. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Once again, definitely on the larger side. Not an XL folder, but definitely on the larger side. And then finally up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action on this knife? If it's running on phosphor bronze, the action's probably not super great, right? Well, it's not going to be the same. Have to unlock it. It's not going to be the same as a knife that's running on bearings. And a lot of people measure the quality of their knife largely on the action. If it's not falling shut, if it doesn't have that ultra smooth action, then it's not really a premium knife. And I would disagree completely. If you've been watching my content over the last however long, I have maintained over and over and over again that the smoothness of the pivot is not entirely indicative of the knife's overall quality. Furthermore, it is not the case that as knives go up in price, they should always have bearings, which is something that I feel like newer people get confused a lot. If you're newer, you can get knives that are $20 that run on bearings, and you can also get knives that cost over $10,000 that run on bearings. Same is true for knives that run on phosphor bronze. It depends on the idea behind the design, right? And how and where it's intended to be used. A lot of super cool, modern, fancy pocket knives run on bearings, and I love that action. I think the action with bearings when it's tuned properly is beautiful. There's definitely something to be said about a nice, smooth bearing operated folder. But there is a lot of purpose behind phosphor bronze, and when it's done right, the action can be very good and purposeful, which is exactly what you're looking at here. When you push that button, it's not going to immediately fall into place, but wow, for phosphor bronze, it's really smooth. I mean, it just takes a little bit of encouragement, honestly. And once you get the swing down, it will definitely just go right into the closed position. I mean, it's pretty great. On top of that, I can absolutely reverse flick it. So the D10 is tuned well enough that I can do that. And even where there is a little bit of excess friction with the phosphor bronze washers, it's still smooth enough that I'm getting that satisfaction. I actually really enjoy a good phosphor bronze knife when it's really kind of a testament, I guess, that the designer, in this case the OEM, when they can get that working and get it really, really smooth. Because oftentimes you kind of have to sacrifice that super duper high quality action for the purpose of phosphor bronze. And, you know, a few people get it right, and I really like that. So this operates very, very well. The thumb studs are placed in a good spot, and on top of that, they're big and wide, and it's not a super tall thumb stud, so it's very comfortable to operate. The entire knife is actually very comfortable to hang onto. Everything sort of is sitting in the right position for you to operate it. Like the average knife person could take this out of the box and deploy it, no problem. For what it is, I think it's excellent, but it's not going to compare to something that is ideally tuned for bearing action. I hope that makes sense. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's really not a thick knife, which I think a lot of people will be really happy about. A lot of times with these robust, sort of hard use, heavy quotes there, cold steel guys are getting up. They're not sitting on their seats anymore. Like, yay! Does this guy know about the cold steel triad lock? I do. Thank you. Yeah, you know, for like a lot of times these big, robust, heavy duty knives are really thick, and this one is not really all that thick. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3, you can see here, it is fairly tall, and it is a pretty long blade. I'm not going to pretend that you're not going to notice this thing in the pocket if you've been carrying knives that are smaller than the PM2, but it's not as big and bulky as you might think. I think there's lots of people out there who carry knives of this size. What are we looking at for materials? We're looking at, in this case, titanium, and we're looking at S35EN. How's that S35EN heat treated? You'll all be happy to know that according to Real Steel's website, it is heat treated between 60 and 62, which I think is just magical for S35EN. There's very few people who are going to be upset about that. That is essentially ideal. Now, there is a specs card here. I'm going to let you guys take a look, and for those of you who want the measurements in millimeters, then there it is, right? But S35EN, it says that the handle material is either titanium or carbon fiber. This one's full tie. The ones that I've seen online are full tie. Apparently there's a carbon fiber version. Either it's there and I just can't find it, or it's yet to be released. I don't know. There's also some indications that this is not the first time that this knife has surfaced in the knife world. If that's true, I'm also not aware of it. Just wanted to let you guys know. It might actually be a design that is re-released. It might also be an evolution of a design that was released a while back. But the designer here is Carson Huang, and you can find it at realsteelknives.com, which is what the link in the description will be. But anyways, those are your materials there. Let's go ahead and weigh it. Is there any milling for weight reduction on the inside? Actually, yeah, there is a little bit. I'm going to guess this is going to be about a 5-ounce knife, maybe a little more. Yeah, 5.6. So it is on the heavier side. It still weighs less than a full titanium XM18. And, you know, for the size that it is, I don't know that it's really all that big of a deal. If there is a carbon fiber version of it out there, it will definitely weigh less. And probably well into the 4-ounce area. So that's what you're looking at there. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness real quick. Blade stock thickness on this guy is coming in at not really all that thick, 126 thousandths, which is kind of cool, right? Let's go ahead. Oh, you know, we need to do the hardware check. I'll get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that's talking about the tools I use on this channel, or the pinned comment right down in the comment section. That pivot looks like it might be a T10, and it is. We have a T10 pivot, and we have a whole bunch of screws, a lot of screws, and these are all, I'm not even going to check it, it's T6. T6, 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 T6. All over the place to hold in this massive backspacer. All right, it's not a deal breaker. It's way more fasteners than I generally enjoy, and I don't love that they're T6. Real Steel would be awesome if this knife had T8 fasteners. Why? Because even the highest quality bits, right, T8 is generally more reliable as long as it's sunk in enough. Right, the fastener's deep enough. T8 is going to be more reliable over a long period of time. It's going to be easier to take apart this knife, put it back together for the people who choose to do that. Not that you really need to do that with a knife like this, but if you need to, it's going to be easier to do. The fasteners are going to hold up over time. The bit's going to hold up better over time. You need to get a high quality bit. I have high quality bits. Thank you very much. It's just the case. It's just the nature of the beast, right? T8's better than T6. I'll hear no arguments. This knife reviewer is super opinionated. I am. That's what happens over 6 years and 4,000 uploads. T6 for the pocket clip, which actually does appear to be reversible because we have a flat stamped clip, unfortunately. It will flip over to the other side, but the angle of the clip will be the other direction. I don't think in this case it's that big of a deal because the bill is symmetrical. It's just this wavy piece back here. So a lot of pieces, but otherwise a simple construction, right? Not going to be an issue for anybody. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's move into the meat and potatoes here. This is a comfortable and good looking knife in my opinion. It's not contoured, but I do appreciate the texturing. I think that's cool, right? Massive backspacer, which I actually kind of like, right? Looks kind of mechanical and it just adds to that heavy duty kind of robust look. I also kind of like this weird little, it's like a Whoville sort of, or let's not say Whoville. It makes me think of the Whoville horn, but really like a wave, I guess, in the ocean. It's just like a fancy cutout they did with the lock bar. It's kind of neat. Access to the lock bar itself is, honestly, it's in a great place. There's no deep cutout, but you can get your finger in there just fine. Giggity. God, that's so lame. I've been making the same jokes for so long. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to those of you who've been around for 6 years. Sorry. I don't have any new material. But anyways, ergonomically, it is quite comfortable. The pocket clip is not a super long clip. So the bill, while it's not prominent and it doesn't go past the 50% line, which is something that I personally enjoy. So back here, it's comfortable. Choked up, in my opinion, it's even more comfortable. There's a little notch right here with some jimping. So it's really, they thought this out, right? I mean, something that I really appreciate about a knife that's clearly intended for harder use than your average folding knife, right? Is ergonomic comfort. Because when you're out using a knife outdoors, right, for various tasks, it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of ergonomics, right? You're going to be moving your hand around a lot. And this knife really accentuates that, ergonomic comfort. Even though there's a lot more handle than there is sharpened edge, this is going to work to your benefit, and it's something that I've really appreciated. It's the reason that I love the Spyderco Shaman so much. Not everybody agrees with me, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to agree with me, but I love this. I think it's great. The edges are nicely chamfered. The titanium is machined very well. They didn't just do a continuous pattern. They left these zones open right here just to add a little bit of spice, a little bit of zazz, and I kind of appreciate that. The button itself is very smooth. Not only, to the touch, but in terms of operation. There's no clinking or clanking. There's no lock stick or anything like that. It's literally just a peg that pushes the Framelock over. The geometry for the Framelock is also very good. And I believe contacts about 50% or so of the tang, which is nice. The tang is also not steeped too far. I'm going to say steeped. It's not a crazy angle where you'd worry about it slipping. So you don't need to actuate the safety in order for the knife to operate. Right? That's not a necessity, but it's there if you want it. Now, there is a distinct click right here, but I feel like it probably should be a bit harder to actuate and disengage the safety. Why? Because if you are, let's say you buy this, right? It's now your property, and regardless of how Real Steel says to use or not use the knife, you're going to use it, right? Everybody's definition of hard use or abuse with a knife is a little bit different, right? I think most of us can agree that throwing your knife as hard as you possibly can against a cement wall is not practical or normal use. But sometimes people get into situations where they're using a knife probably outside of the natural parameters of what a knife is meant to be used for. This safety is handy. Now, if you're really torquing on it, there technically is a chance that you could disengage the lock, right? And then on top of that, if you're in the standard grip, and honestly, even the choked up grip, your fingers kind of naturally land on that button. Now, this is a lot. I'm jumping through a lot of hoops here to set up a hypothetical example. Hypothetically, you're freaking going Rambo with this thing, right? You're just going hardcore, Chuck Norris, all that, right? You've got the safety on and it's not going to disengage this way, but then you accidentally slip, disengage it, and then you're pushing down on that button, which honestly it takes quite a bit of force. I was trying to set myself up for an example where this would actually happen, but truthfully, if your hands are on this and you're pushing the button down, the other side of your hand is actually pushing the lock bar back into place. It's very unlikely. Let's put it that way. Technically possible, but the amount of force, like right there, I'm trying to disengage this with my hand, and I honestly can't do it because the squeeze that's required to get that leverage on the button, I'm creating an equal force on the other side. So actually, it does work, right? So I think under only the wildest of circumstances, right? Like if you are a YouTube abuse knife abuse tester, right? And you're setting yourself up for the perfect example to generate all these views. Then you probably could disengage it, right? But I think most people under normal circumstances, I doubt it, right? The lock bar tension is pretty heavy. In fact, this thing has some serious lock bar tension. That relief cut doesn't look any thinner or smaller than normal relief cuts, but they really have that thing. That lock bar does not want to go the other way. And that button needs enough travel, right? It doesn't look like it needs that much, but it has to travel quite a ways for the thing to be disengaged. So again, the hoops you'd have to jump through to get it to disengage is, you'd have to be full on, maxed out, dial to 11, Chuck Norris mode, accidentally disengage the safety, squeeze, somehow overcome the force of your own hand while you're cutting, and then it might disengage. But not likely. Honestly, I think this system is pretty cool, and I'd like to see it on more stuff. I would just like to see the button and the safety in an area where it's much harder to actuate it. I know it's not, I don't know how they could get the button up here and get it to actuate the lock bar while still allowing the blade to move and miss everything on the way around, right? It might seem as simple as take the button and put it up here. It's not really that simple, right? There's a lot that you have to think about, right, in terms of getting the bar to move over, but I think it's technically possible. The idea is very good, though. I really like it. Moving on here, I like the blade shape. I think the blade shape's cool. I think it's very practical, very utilitarian. It's a pretty straightforward blade shape, right? It doesn't take a master blade identifier to look at this and say, yeah, that's going to work for a lot of different things. It just is, right? We have a pretty big flat running out to about 75, 80% the length of the blade. A nice swedge up here. Honestly, there's enough going on here. You get a little bit of personality, right? Nice drop right here. Good tip. Behind the edge, reasonable. It's not incredibly thin or anything like that, but it's going to slice. I've got a note card here. It's going to slice pretty efficiently. It's not going to be like an Openo laser beam, but it's going to be good. An S35VN from 60 to 62 is great. On top of that, it's not a nightmare to sharpen. Also, the blade has a continuous belly, so we don't have any change of angles, compound, this or that. Just, most of the time, strop it up. Literally a leather strop with some compound on it. A little bit of stropping. That's going to fix most little teeny tiny, unless you are pounding on this thing, chopping bricks in half every day, making teeth out of that plain edge, you're probably not going to need much more than a leather strop for the most part. And after a long period of time, after the edge is fatigued, then yes, after that, you'll have to do a little bit of sharpening. But S35VN, I think, is a very friendly blade material. And for a knife like this, I think it's just about ideal because it is stainless. So yeah, I really applaud just about everything about the blade. I think it's awesome. The backspacer is probably creating some extra weight. You know what? It's really not bad, though. I thought the combination of the full tie scales and that huge backspacer would throw the balance off, but no, it's actually right there where your index finger is going to be anyway. So not bad. Really, it's so comfortable. Had this thing been contoured, it would have been an absolute dream, but all of this is just really, really comfortable. I don't have an issue with it. There's a glass breaker on there, so, there you go. If you drive your car off a bridge, then I understand it happens, right? And if you're in that very specific circumstance and all you have is your trusty Real Steel Evolution on you, then by God, you might survive the day. But for everybody else, 99.999999999% of the time, you won't use this. So, okay. I didn't see any other parts or anything like that in the box. I suppose you could take it off. I don't know that it's completely integral to this. It looks like you could just remove it. If not, it's not really in the way. It's got the lanyard thing on it, right? It's one way or another. I can't say. I'm poking fun at it, but I really don't care that it's there. In and out of the pocket, this was a breeze. I definitely noticed I was carrying a larger knife, but not crazy. I personally am used to carrying knives that are a little bit larger. And even as somebody who walks around in sweatpants a lot of the time, it wasn't that big of a deal. Some people are going to notice it more than others, but I don't really consider this to be a monster knife. I do like the profile of the pocket clip. It's knocked down. It's stamped, which is kind of a bummer, but everything here, to my knowledge, we'll test it. Let's get the blade out of there because the blade is definitely steel and will be magnetic. Yeah, all of this. This is all except for the glass breaker itself. Smart thinking. Except for the glass breaker itself, everything else is titanium. So they went that way. I think that's nice, right? Lock bar insert that does double as the over travel stop, which is nice. We have, is it a stop pin or is it? No, it is. It is a stop pin, and there is maybe a tiny bit of shouldering. Any blade play? No, none. What I'm doing here is I'm kind of going around in circles. No, it's completely solid. Centering. Is it? Oh, it looks pretty centered to me. Yeah. Really, and there's no, like, here's the detent. The detent's pretty heavy too. This isn't going to be for everybody, right? A lot of times in this, well, I remember when I was like getting into knives, I was like, oh, titanium and like M390, S35VN, oh! And I got this like sort of unrealistic idea of what like a heavy duty knife was. And then ironically, a lot of these things had bearings. These super steels actually weren't necessarily the best. I mean, S35VN is actually pretty good, but it's not like 1095 is good for hard use, right? I know there's a lot of like fixed blade guys out there who are like, you don't know what hard use is until you use a good 1095 fixed blade to smash a log in half in the middle of the forest. Ripping my chest hair. Yeah, all right, cool. We've all seen the same YouTube videos too. That's cool. But we're talking about pocket knives, right? Hard use for a pocket knife is obviously different. Like nobody's laboring under any delusion there. We get it. But a lot of these crazy super steels, right? And you know, and the combination of titanium does not necessarily equate to hard use. It's just the idea of that. Ooh, heavy duty, titanium, solid metal, right? Super steel. All of that. But there's a lot of other things that need to be in place in order for a knife to be able to venture even slightly outside of the path of just normal pocket knife use. And this actually does it, right? Now, is a cold steel triad lock technically stronger? I mean, yeah, you can put that in a vise and hang, 700 pounds off the blade. And it'll hold up probably better than this. What real world scenario are you going to be able to use that knife in? That accentuates that ability? None. There are none scenarios. So if you are all about that marketing, then you go ahead and buy a cold steel triad lock. But for those of you who like the titanium frame lock, look and design and feel, right? You just need something that's going to help or assist the blade in locking out just a little bit more, just to make sure that you've got that extra bit of comfort, even if it doesn't really come into play 99% of the time, right? This is going to work out for you. This is cool. And it is. I mean, this is one of those knives where the money that you're spending on it is almost entirely going into capability. You are gaining a benefit with a titanium frame. They are definitely solid and it can't rust, right? And the S35VN is a good combination of edge retention, toughness, ease of sharpening. It's just a very balanced composition. Cap that off with a locking system that is a bit more secure than a standard frame lock, and phosphor bronze washers to keep the crap out of the pivot. You have a pretty low maintenance, generally all-purpose folding knife. When I say all-purpose, again, I don't mean scaling a building or anchoring a boat, right? But generally all-purpose for a reasonable knife user. That's what you've got here. This is a pretty cool knife. It comes in at $250 and the knife is made in China. But honestly, versus general competition, I think this is pretty well priced. It doesn't blow me away. It doesn't blow my socks off, and people that have to reduce the value to the materials alone might have a little bit of a problem here, but I think there was a lot of thought in this. And personally, I would not be bothered by spending $250 on a knife like this. Of course, you can get a completely functional and capable knife for far less than that, but if you're somebody who's looking for this combination of elements, this is a good buy. I like this a lot. I think they did a good job with this. I don't know that I have anything else to say. This is a recommendable knife. I think it's a great design. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Thanks again to Real Steel for sending this knife in for me to take a look at. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.